I'm Greg Braun, the Executive Director of the Guardians of Martin County. And the Guardians are just starting off on a series of podcasts. We're going to be interviewing a variety of local collaborators on water quality and growth management, on a whole variety of environmental topics during the next several months. We're hoping to have various guest presenters along with us. Some of these are going to be audio only, others will be audio, and we'll be taking walks in the woods and looking at stormwater treatment areas and the C44 reservoir and things like that. So in our overall lineup, we're hoping to have interviews with Eve Samples from the Friends of the Everglades, Mark Perry from Florida Oceanographic Society, Jim Moyer from the Indian River Lagoon. He's the river keeper for our area. Folks from the Rivers Coalition, the new Martin County Forever initiative, some of the parks folks from Martin County, and other state parks and national wildlife refuges. So tune in. We're hoping to release these on a monthly basis beginning in January 2024. For today's show, we have Peter Conze, the president of the Guardians of Martin County. Thank you for joining me, Peter.
It's a pleasure, of course.
And certainly we'd like to get your perspective on the history of the Guardians. So can you walk us back a number of years about the origination? What kind of led to the Guardians forming?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, it was the wonderful dedication of a magnificent man, Bernie Auer. Bernie Auer had served in the 70s as the publisher of Time magazine. And he and his family lived in Connecticut, where in fact I grew up. And so I knew the family. And on one happy day in 2007, when my wife and I had just come to Florida, literally, and taken out our residency status, we basically were shopping in town, and whom should I encounter but indeed Bernie Auer. And the unusual, quick-witted reaction to say, "Oh, Bernie, it's so magnificent to see you." And indeed, he was a magnificent person in so many respects. And what a joy. What can I do to be helpful to you? And he looked me straight in the eye with his charming face, and he said, very simple, "You can join my cause, which is to try to protect and preserve our wonderful environment in Martin County." So that was my early initiation to the Guardians. And thereafter, Bernie was fading off the full-time activities. His mission was being taken over by others like me, some of whom were more senior nonetheless. And we passed into the teen decade of the century, trying to decide how we could be most effective and indeed preserve what we all call our wonderful quality of life in Martin County.
Great. That's a great introduction. And I'm wondering if there were some environmental issues that were going on at that time that prompted Bernie Auer to feel the need for an organization such as this.
Well, my understanding of Bernie's approach was that basically he was suspicious that a number of people in Martin County were more concerned about trying to develop the county and would do so to some extent without properly considering not only the wishes and objectives of the people living in the county, but more importantly, the provisions of the Comprehensive Growth Management Plan, which, as is my understanding, was based on a series of acts prepared by the Florida legislature in the 1980s, in Martin County, championed so very, very much by Maggie, Hurchalla, aided and abetted by Nathaniel. And in fact, Bernie Auer's objective was to make sure that whomever it was who was nominated for important political positions, primarily as commissioners of the county and indeed of Jupiter Island, where he was living, would espouse the same sense of mission as would he.
So let's talk first about Nathaniel. He was certainly on the Guardians advisory board for a number of years.
Nathaniel had more credentials than any of us could possibly ever assume in a normal lifetime to have accumulated. So we were extremely fortunate to have his wisdom and guidance sort of backing up and or leading, as the case may be, depending upon the various issues we were talking about, the efforts of the Guardians going forward. He obviously had political connections, which periodically he would utilize to our advantage, whether they should be in Tallahassee or indeed in Washington. So from our perspective, he was an invaluable asset, as indeed was Maggie Hurchalla, who had so brilliantly articulated and championed the various protective clauses of the Comprehensive Growth Management Plan for Martin County. And in her name and Nathaniel's name, we seem to feel that we're trying to live up to their standards and do whatever they would have wished us to do for the benefit of everybody.
Yeah, that's great. Do I recall correctly that Nathaniel Reed was one of the principal authors of the Federal Endangered Species Act?
I believe that's the case, but I can't validate that. I just know that he had, a plethora of credentials, and depending upon what it was you wanted to speak with him about, inevitably you would learn something because he knew so much.
Absolutely. And I think the Reed family's decades of conservation and preservation work on and around Jupiter Island and Hope Sound is really what has prompted some of the land conservation activities that are underway at the time.
Well, we certainly think that's the case, and we were very fortunate to have him as the champion of our cause.
So he had been working up at the federal level and was knowledgeable about the national legislation. And then Maggie Hurchalla, who you mentioned, was more of a local hero for us as one of the principal authors of the Comprehensive Growth Management Plan for Martin County back in the 1980s. Was she on the board of directors or was she an advisor?
Maggie was an informal advisor. I think at the end of the day, we put her name on our masthead because she was such an important and persuasive person. But in any event, we were very fortunate to have both Maggie and Nathaniel on our team. There's no question about that.
And Maggie knew the comprehensive plan backwards and forwards.
And indeed, where the commas and exclamation marks should also go. The issues that we initially encountered had to do primarily with water and the pollution and contamination of Lake Okeechobee with the passage of contaminated water, indeed, into the Everglades. And Maggie and Nathaniel both were very, very staunchly concerned that whatever we should do, whether it was with the South Florida Water Management Group on the one hand, the governor's more active allies on the other, and or businesses, in particular Van Hool sugar operations, notwithstanding as well the farmers whose ranches, indeed farms, border Lake Okeechobee and were otherwise prone to allow to filter off into the lake contaminated water. So indeed, these were the most immediate issues, and there were instances of children even becoming infested with amoeba that were poisonous and indeed could in fact kill them because they were sustained. Indeed, these amoeba were sustained by the infiltration of the contaminants in the water supply for the county. That was the first effort in the largest sense of the term. The second situation we encountered had to do with the Brightline train, and the concern that we all had was that indeed the train would move ahead with all sorts of political backing, representing, as it were, a variety of different aspects of continuing development for Florida on its east coast and especially. But simultaneously, and most importantly, that inadequate safety measures, I should say, would be taken. And our concern was that train passing at such a high rate of speed, whether on the one hand delivering produce and freight, or on the other hand passengers, as it eventually decided it should wish to do between Orlando and Miami, would endanger the lives of any and all people whose properties or activities bordered the train line. So these were our first two concerns, water and then train. We fought long and hard as far as the train is concerned. The train situation is continuing to develop. We're very much worried about the safety features that the administration of the train and the administration in Florida should take to rectify the inadequacies of those safeguards. On the one hand, we applaud the fact that the promoters of the train were able to finally get to a finished track, so to speak. Yet on the other hand, we remain very, very concerned that people's lives are in danger as a result of the activities of the trains.
Great. Certainly, these kinds of growth management related issues and water quality aren't as high in profile as what they call the charismatic megafauna, the manatees and dolphins and whales and all that sort of thing. So I'm wondering if you feel that the Guardians fill sort of a unique niche as far as advocating for, on behalf of the comprehensive plan and growth management.
Well, I feel we're sort of on the front line, so to speak, in terms of a unique niche, and that was, of course, due very much to Bernie Auer's foresight and his dedication to his purpose. But I think that gradually now, and hopefully increasingly, more and more people, not only in Martin County but in adjacent counties, are beginning to see how deleterious so many of the development activities could be if they were not properly supervised, let alone planned, organized, and undertaken. And that the interaction, on the one hand, of the political groups that would like to see even more development, more tourist dollars, et cetera, for the sake of Florida. Notwithstanding, the fact of the matter is that we really are very concerned about the safety of our people and the, more importantly, possibly continuing ability to meet the mission to preserve our quality of life in Martin County.
Yeah, you've mentioned water a couple of different times, and to that end, don't the Guardians becoming involved with groups like the Rivers Coalition and the Indian River Keeper and the National Estuary Program?
Well, we're fortunate to have them as allies, indeed. We all have a common objective, which is the cleanliness of our water supply and the long-lasting capabilities of these supplies for the benefit of all of the Florida residents who take advantage of them. And very much so, we want to make sure that wildlife at the same time, and indeed the fauna, so to speak, of the water areas, in fact, is preserved and for the benefit of any and all who wish to enjoy it.
I know one of the big keys for the River Keeper has been the protection of the wetlands in the Indian River Lagoon watershed. And my recollection is that Martin County has the most stringent wetland protection standards in the state. Haven't there been some attacks on that in the past?
To the best of my knowledge, yes, but I think we should ask you, Greg, to detail, in fact, what those attacks are, because I can't be that specific. But the fact of the matter is we all share the necessity to have pure water. And on that basis, anything and everything we can do in collaboration with the river keepers and with Vote Water and any of the other groups that are very much involved in trying to preserve the cleanliness of our water supply is to everybody's advantage.
Yeah, certainly one example that I remember from a couple of years ago now was an attack on small wetlands. And if you recall that, the situation was that virtually all wetlands in Martin County are protected, even small ones. And the proposal to the Martin County Commission was essentially recognizing that if you don't want to move the urban services boundary, something's got to go. And let's just eliminate the protection of those small wetlands. And this was before the passing of Maggie Hurchalla, and I recall she and I and others being speakers at a community forum that brought together a lot of people to learn more about small wetlands and the functions that they provide as far as storing surface water and habitat for wildlife and that sort of thing. And the ultimate result of that, after this educational session, was that on the day that the Martin County Commission was to then make some decision about whether or not to waive those protections, there was a whole full house, standing room only house, in the county commission chambers. And ultimately, the commission, when the applicants saw that they were being faced with denial, they withdrew the application. And so ultimately, the wetlands in Martin County continued to be preserved. And I think that's important because of the way those wetlands function as kidneys for the environment. There's always going to be some low area, and during periods of heavy rain, water's going to go, it's going to flow downhill. And if we fill in those low wetlands, the water's going to go someplace. And ultimately, we don't want it to go out into the river, the St. Lucie River, or the Indian River Lagoon, without being filtered one way or another. So that was a particular example, I'd say, of the community responding to an attack on the environment. The Guardians are also vocally in support of maintaining the urban services boundary. Can you speak a little bit about what that line is and the attacks on it?
Well, starting from the basis that the urban services boundary was defined in the Comprehensive Growth Management Acts of the 80s, and indeed the county commission and its administrative staff was charged with the responsibility of protecting the plan, but indeed preserving the urban services boundary. We were all led to believe that this was an area which appropriately would receive the benefit of taxes raised on citizens in Martin County. But then the question would arise, and indeed is constantly on everybody's mind, as to how we deal with anticipated, if not actual, growth. Population swinging into Martin County, as elsewhere in Florida, with over, I'm led to believe, 1,000 new residents of Florida every day. We're now the third most populous state in the Union, with over 22 million people, behind California and Texas. But that does not absolve us of the responsibilities simultaneously to try to protect all the very best things that have drawn these new people, new residents to Florida to live. So from our perspective, the Guardians' main mission must indeed constantly be to try to bolster any and all efforts to maintain the purity and cleanliness of our water for the benefit of all concerned.
Well, decisions on growth management and the urban services boundary protection, this sort of thing, they're very complex. Do the Guardians have expertise in that sort of thing, or do you rely on other statewide organizations to provide some assistance?
Well, little kidding, we have some expertise with our esteemed Executive Director Greg Braun, who's trying to ask these questions. But on the other hand, I think we've got access and/or could always generate access to any and all experts whom we should like to have join our cause and/or comment about what is, our principal objective in terms of maintaining the purity and cleanliness of the water. But the fact remains, we have to try to rally an ever-increasing interest amongst the residents, citizens of our county, so that they are maintaining and demanding, in fact, the highest standard of concern on the one hand, as well as maintenance of the various rules and regulations we have to protect what we've got.
My recollection is that Nathaniel Reed, that you were talking about previously, was also one of the founders of the nonprofit group 1,000 Friends of Florida.
Indeed, he was. So the objective that I've tried to articulate is shared by a variety of groups. Some of them are better known, some of them are better financed, but all of us are very much sharing the same concern that we want to protect what we've got.
Yeah, I mean, we've been very pleased that 1,000 Friends of Florida has provided some assistance to the Guardians in analyzing a lot of these growth management related proposals. We don't know the details about how traffic should be analyzed and residential capacity studies and that sort of thing.
Well, it just seems to me that what we would like ultimately to help stimulate is broad a coalition and as strong a collaborative force, I should say, amongst all of the environmental groups that have water as one of its principal concerns, or their principal concerns, for the obvious reason that we all depend on it as for our livelihoods as well as our ongoing lives. Simple as that.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And I know as I'm out in the community, I often hear people talking about, well, these decisions are made at the political level by the city commission or the county commission, and why don't the Guardians become more aggressive or assertive in trying to influence the political process? Can you say a few words about the limitations that are come along with being a 501c3 organization?
Well, I confess right up front that I'm not a lawyer, therefore I can't be too articulate about how this works. But the fact of the matter is that as a group trying to educate our constituency, the Guardians can go as far as we should like in terms of trying to generate funding for our activities on a tax-deductible basis. Once we get into the political realm, where it becomes apparent that to have something take place might require the dispensation of some money to a developer or otherwise, we are completely out of that park, and we're in fact very concerned that the politics has gone awry, and indeed the pure objective of maintaining our integrity of our environment is otherwise going to be squandered.
Right. So as a 501c3 organization, the Guardians' nonprofit status is as an educational entity.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think that's the reason that the information that the Guardians provide, whether it's newsletters or e-blasts or whatever it is, need to be educational rather than as an advocate for a political candidate or anything like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So is the Guardians a membership type organization?
We are a membership organization to the extent that we count as members any and all people who are kind enough to donate some funding to us to enable us to maintain our mission as effectively as we can. Everybody, in one sense of the term, is a guardian of our wonderful quality of life, the preservation of what we hold dear in Martin County. So to that extent, we don't require anybody to have a membership card per se. We just hope that whomever is involved with us will in fact be as dedicated as the rest of us are in trying to maintain our quality of life.
Great. And how do the Guardians communicate with that donor base?
Periodically, we write solicitation letters to those who have given in the past, as well as those whom we think might be inclined to give us donations going forward. We're constantly trying to spread the umbrella, so to speak, to those whom we have not been able to engage in the same sense prior to this point. But the fact of the matter is we are committed to, as collaborative and cooperative, a group of dedicated individuals as possible with as many members of our so-called small m membership group as we can maintain and stimulate.
Is there a minimum dollar donation for somebody to become a Guardian?
No, not at all. We're very pleased to have any donation, whatever it happens to be.
I've also seen some of the Guardians' newsletters, In Balance. Can you say a few words about that? How frequently does it come out? How would people access that or get on the mailing list?
Certainly by making a donation to the Guardians, and there are points of public access, no problem at all. I mean, one can just go online and type in theguardiansofmartincounty.com and eventually come up with our website, and indeed see all the publications. The In Balance publication that we're referring to, we initiated a number of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I guess it was. The objective being very simply to try to bring people up to date with what's been going on, and in fact to illustrate in photographic form the impact of what it is we're trying to do, or indeed the problems that we feel we are trying to deal with as well. So those solicitation letters on the one hand and issues of imbalance on the other are our principal PR activities. But now, of course, here we are with podcasts, and secondly, we have advertisements on WQCS. We, as far as we can afford it, we'll try to do whatever we can to bring awareness amongst the public as to what it is we're up to.
Do the Guardians have open meetings to either your donors or available to the
A number of
community?
times during the year we will have open meetings, and we'll try to stimulate as much activity and participation as we can. Generally, we meet as a board of directors at least once a month. We have an advisory board of very qualified individuals who help the cause in general, as well as specifically deal with in collaboration with some of our directors on certain projects. And just as and when and if we believe we have something of importance to share with the public, we indeed will put that issue into, an imbalance, the next publication of imbalance and/or a letter to all of our participants.
I think there's a perception out there in the community that those who know about the Guardians think that it's a Hobe Sound only kind of a group. Don't you have board members from other parts of the county, and don't the Guardians try to represent environmental issues on a countywide basis?
Well, indeed, that's precisely what we should like to do. We were fortunate enough to have as our founder Bernie Auer, who was, of course, a resident of Jupiter Island, and therefore Hobe Sound was the beginning nexus, so to speak, of the activity. But indeed, we have tried, and we continue to try, and we'll try even harder to engage and enlist other members of the Martin County community who live elsewhere, because the problems that they may encounter in their particular neighborhoods could very much be similar to those that we have in the southern part of Martin County, where this effort initially began.
Yes, great. And I've also seen a number of the Guardians' e-blasts. Can you talk a little bit about what an e-blast is and how often the Guardians send those out?
Well, specifically an e-blast it would be generated if, lo and behold, there's a specific issue that we feel requires immediate attention. And we think that the numbers of Guardians who could make their opinions known on this particular issue to state representatives, commissioners, what have you, anybody in the political realm of things who otherwise would have a say as to what ultimately might happen, would be to the benefit of everybody in the community. So our objective would be to engage as many people as we possibly can to support the cause.
Yes, great. There's certainly a lot of talk these days about the Western lands, and I remember hearing that the Guardians were an advocate for a study of the Western lands so that they don't essentially, the agricultural industry doesn't get sort of just bought out by residential development.
Well, this in fact is the fear that we all have, that our territory, put it in the broadest sense of the term, is so lush and attractive and livable in so many ways, offers so much in terms of wildlife and environmental pleasure to those who live here and can take advantage of it, that it would be otherwise squandered by developers who simultaneously think they can capitalize on what Martin County has to offer. And the last thing we should wish to see is urban sprawl, which would basically do away with this natural bucolic nature of our county. So from our perspective, while on the one hand we think development could be beneficial if, lo and behold, it generates the kind of income that would be necessary to sustain the social services and otherwise the services provided by the county for its residents. On the other hand, we don't want to see that done at the expense of taking away, indeed, the beneficial aspects of our environment that everybody heretofore has enjoyed.
Thanks, Peter. Anything else we ought to discuss?
Well, we want to thank everybody who may have listened to this, especially if you have donated to the Guardians and or you have a determination carrying your donation forward to assist us in trying to make our cause a really effective and forceful cause to achieve our ultimate mission and goal, the balance of life and the quality of life, so to speak, of Martin County for the benefit of all to enjoy.
Thanks, Peter. This is Greg Braun, the Executive Director of the Guardians of Martin County. I've been speaking today with Peter Conze, the President of the Guardians, and we'll hope that you will tune in to future podcasts where we will be talking about other environmental issues of interest to the Martin County and the Treasure Coast. But we hope you'll join us for the next installment of the Guardians podcast, where we will be talking about the Loxa-Lucie Headwaters initiative. And we're pleased to have noted wildlife TV personality Jeff Corwin, who has joined the Loxa-Lucie and the Guardians of Martin County as an advisor. He and local artist and artisan Jeffrey Smith will be joining us for that podcast. I hope you'll join us.